Hi everybody, welcome back to another series. So today we are going to talk about validation, and specifically validation using Zod. Now if you don't know Zod is a so if you go to npm, you'll find the package that is posted over there. Zod is just a TypeScript fast validation library that you use schemas to define the data, and basically you can be able to validate this data using the pass method. So first, before we dive into that, it's good to mention that NestJS already has a class validator that you can use to validate your data. And so here I have initialized a simple app that all it does really is just post the data and you can patch the data. This is enough. This will be enough to demonstrate what I want to demonstrate. And when you go into our service class, you'll see that all we do is just return the data that has been passed. And again, the idea is just to validate the data and not necessarily into persisting it. That is why I do not try and persist this data in a database. So I'm just going to take you very quickly through the app, the directories. Here we have a DTO folder which defines our data using the class validator, and in most NestJS apps, at least the ones that I've seen, many people use class validators, and I'm going to demonstrate how that works. And you can see that I have a class DTO here, and I have some decorators that try to enforce some rules on these values, and then the update DTO just extends the partial type of the create user DTO. And so we're going to run this up. So for testing, I'm just using the REST client because it's something very simple. So first of all, you can see here that this data that I'm trying to pass over here does not meet these requirements. So let's see. You can see that the email is an integer. It's not a string, and then the email that I'm trying to pass here is not a valid email. So let's see what happens. And now you can see here that no error is thrown, and this is a bit concerning, right? Because we think, or rather we would assume that our decorators here are validating the data that is passing through the request, right? But then that's the thing with using class validators. You have to come back here and you have to sort of register it by this function, use global pipes, because it's a pipe. And here you can pass a new validation pipe like that. And let us try and run it again and see what happens. So let us try and run the same data, and now we get the error being thrown back to the user. And so most people forget to do this part here where they register the validation pipe using the use global pipes method. And really what this does, this is just a decorator, and it just sets the metadata but doesn't really do anything. And so for you to enforce the validation, you have to really come back here and register the and use the validation pipe. So again, for this video, I wanted us to take a look at the at Zod as a validator. So let us try and implement it. And before I go any further, I would like to mention that this video is inspired by another video that was posted by Kevin. I'm going to link it in the description, so if you want to check it out, it is more explanatory. It is a bit longer than mine, but you'll get the full picture when you take a look at it. So let us use Zod for this. Okay, so if you want to use Zod for validation, Zod is schema driven, and not like class validator, which is more or less decorator heavy. As you can see here, you have to make sure if you do not put a decorator there, it doesn't get validated. So that's one thing you should know. So for us to use Zod, first of all we have to install it. So install Zod, but I already did that, so I'm not going to try and reinstall it again, but you have to do it if you want to use Zod. And so I'm just going to leave this here for if you want to compare how the two compare to each other. So here you mostly want to create a schema, and the schema itself is a Zod object. So let us import let's import it from Zod, which again I installed, that's why it's working. Let us also comment this one out. So let us push this at the top so that it's a bit cleaner, and let me just close this one off like that. So Zod, you create an object from it, and we're just going to use the same values here, and we can say Zod.string, meaning we should make sure that it's a string, and you can also add some dot trim. You can also trim it to remove the trailing white spaces. You can also put a minimum value, and you can already start seeing how Zod is a bit more powerful and simple to use, because all you just do is just chaining the validation rules. And we can set email to say that it should be an email. First of all, we can also trim it. We can also define a minimum value. No email should be less than 3 characters, and maximum with no email should be more than, let's put 50, because that relatively it makes more sense that way. Anyway, another thing you have to realize about Zod. So right now if we leave it this way and come back to our controllers, okay, so first of all, this doesn't exist because we commented out in our DTO class. So for us to sort of try and create a class validator type so that we can be able to use it in our controller here, is that we have to come here and let's export let's put it as a const. Okay, let's export. We can infer a type here, create as a DTO, and we can say it's another powerful thing about Zod is that you can be able to create a type from a Zod schema using this infer. And basically what we can do is that we can infer it from the type of Zod schema, like that. And what this does is that it just creates, as you can see what it does, it basically does exactly this. It creates a type from the Zod schema using the Zod.infer. And so when we come back here, we can just be able to import it, but then we have to put a type there because now it's being imported as a type. And we do the same with update here, and so we can comment this out just so you can see how it compares with Zod. So we can create let's export it just in case we need it anyway. A constant type. Okay, let's just call it Zod update user schema, and it comes from Zod. Let us see. Comes from Zod user schema. How did I call it? I forgot. Let's come here. Let me call it Zod user schema so that it really is easy for us to remember. So Zod user schema, and it gives us a function here which is partial, and we can just be able to pass whatever thing we want to do with it, but we do not want to strip anything off, so we can just leave it like that. And then here we can export update user DTO, and let us put it as a type like that, and we can just do the same with what we did before. We can import z from Zod and infer like that from the type of Zod update schema, and export type like that, and then again we also have to import it as a type. And so essentially this basically just we're setting up the Zod validation, and for us to make this work we have to introduce the concept of pipes. And a pipe is basically a class that runs before your controller handler executes. So let me show you the request lifecycle, or rather the lifecycle of NestJS programs. So when you run a request, it goes through, so this is the request, it then goes through the middlewares, so we will have middleware here, and then it goes through the guards, and then through the pipes, and then this is where, if everything is okay, it goes through the controllers. And so this is where our pipe resides, and this is where we can sort of try and validate the data that is coming, that wants to be used as an argument in our controllers, where we can again validate it. We can reject it if it's not okay, and if it's okay we can accept it. And normally the value returned by the pipe becomes the argument in the controller, and I'm just going to demonstrate that in a minute here. So let's create here a folder called common, and inside common let's create pipes, and then inside pipe we can create our Zod pipe.typescript like that. And for you to create a pipe in NestJS, you have to implement the, so let us call this class Zod, let's call it custom Zod pipe, which implements the pipe transform like that. And we want this to be generic, so we're going to start using generics here, and then here the value is just going to be unknown, and it's going to be like that. And for you to, so if it implements the pipe transform, you have to implement the transform function, which takes a value and a metadata. So for now we do not really need the metadata, but we need the value. And here let us go ahead and define a constructor, and in our constructor is where we're going to have the schema, which is of type Zod type, so like that. And again it's going to be generic, because that basically just means it's that it can take any type of data. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to define a variable, and we can be able to use the schema here. So this schema, and we're going to use a function called savePass. Here we're going to pass in the value that is going to be passing through our pipe like that. And when you sort of try and hover here, you can see that it returns Zod savePass results, and with the results we can be able to check if it was a success. So we can check if it was not a success like that, that means there was an error, so we can throw new bad request exception, and here we can pass an object with what we want it to say. So we can say validation error, and then we can also, for the user to be able to debug easily, we can pass the error like that. So if everything is okay, we can just return the response.data. And as I said before, the value returned by a pipe is taken as the argument in the controller. And so here what we can do is we can pass here our newly created pipe, which is the Zod, I don't remember how I called it, custom, I don't remember, I think I called it custom Zod pipe like that. And here we can pass in our Zod user schema, because this is what is going to be used to validate against the data that is passing by. And I'm just gonna check here everything is working fine, so we can try and run that application, see if there's any error. So the app has started. Let us try and send the same data, and you can see here immediately we get an error message being given to us. Okay, this is very terrible. So let us try and enhance this, right? Because the issues really looks a bit hard for a person to read. So let us come back into our ZodPipe here, and what we can do is we can create our own function that formats the issues, and we can pass here as a value, we can pass as a parameter, we can pass Zod error, because it is of type Zod error. And essentially what it's going to return is that it's going to return the error. We're going to map through the error, and we're going to map through the issues, because you saw from how the data is being returned, it's the relevant data, at least for us, is inside the issue object. So we're going to map through that, and then for every issue we are going to return a constructed object which is going to have the path, which is the issue path, so that the user can know which property is wrong with your object that you're passing through our application. And then we can have the code as well, the code, and let's see what else we can get here. We can also have the message. So let us give them our own message inside here, which is message like that. And now instead of returning the issues like this, we can just return the results of path format issues. And now when we run our application, we have generally more readable and well formatted issues. Okay, so now we've already set up the Zod validation. We can see that it's being able to validate our data. So if I pass here the correct data, so let us do that, and we can add here that. Let's just bring this up. Let us start the server, and when we run this, it gets accepted. But if we have anything that is even wrong about the data that we're trying to pass, we get an error. Great. So something else that I'd like to mention is how redundant this feels every time you're trying to validate any object or any data that is passing by here. So imagine we also had this, and we also want to use Zod here. We'd also have to pass this, and instead of all this repetition, what we can do is we can come here in our common and create a decorator, and inside this we can just create a Zod decorator dot .js. The naming convention of how I name my files is opinionated, so you can always name it the way you want. And so inside our Zod decorator, what we can do is we can export a constant called Zod body, or however you want to call it, and it's a function, a generic one, that takes in as a parameter Zod type, which again the Zod type is generic. And then what it does is that it wraps around the body, which comes from NestJS common, and inside here is where we can then call our Zod. I keep forgetting how we named it. I think it's custom ZodPipe, like that. And then inside here we can pass this schema like that. And so each time we need to come here, instead of doing this, we can just pass here the Zod body like that, and all we need to do is pass the Zod schema, the Zod user schema, like that. And and this shouldn't change anything with how our app functions. So if we come here and run this, we still get the errors if there are some present, and if no error is present, it just works. And so guys, this is how you can use Zod for validation, and we have gone a bit far and beyond by implementing our own decorator which wraps around the body, and we've talked a little bit about pipes and how we can use pipes to validate data using Zod, and I've also shown the advantages of using Zod, because with Zod it is schema driven, so validating the data is a bit faster, and faster in terms of you can be able to access the data that you're validating through the Zod object. Like, let me show you here. So you can see that the data is stored in the Zod object, and when we want to validate it inside the pipe, we can just be able to do that by calling this function here, schema save pass, and we can be able to see if there are any errors with the value that is being passed in our pipe. And so if you would like me to create a more detailed video covering decorators and pipes, be sure to leave a comment for that. But this is going to be the end of our video. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something from it, and see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video.